back to another episode of Vive Nutrition Radio. We are one man down this week and probably the upcoming weeks.
That's why we're all wearing black.
Yes, we're all wearing black.
R.I.P. Nathan Diaz, man.
We are grieving. So our buddy Nate, he actually took a job. And on Wednesdays, which is when we record this episodes, he's not going to longer be present. So we're going to miss you, buddy. But I'm sure he'll come back. He'll come soon enough. But yeah, so. Well, it's the three of us until we find like a replacement, or maybe we just won't find a replacement. I think maybe you're just gonna have to be like us three and like.
I think I'm kind of cool with that, man. I don't really know who else.
I think we have a good Latin combination. We have South America, Central America, then we have the Caribbean. So
Caribbean, yeah, that's good.
Or we get someone from Spain. That might be the only other Spanish that we're missing.
Yeah, with the
yeah. Oh, tío, ¿cómo está, tío?
I was gonna make an attempt to do an accent, but then I remember I suck at him, so I was like, I'm not.
Oh yeah, I'm the worst at it too. I will say the first time that I heard that accent, I was like, what am I hearing right now?
Yeah, the ones that have been getting a little bit better is going to be the Argentina accent, because I've been dealing with so many people from Argentina lately. So it's like, boludo.
I don't think I've.
Like,
okay.
Che boludo.
Che boludo.
Yeah, dude. When I was working in baseball, there was one guy, he's Dominican, just like me, but literally he asked a question. I was like, what'd you say? And this is all in Spanish. And I was like, one more time. And literally everyone was like, don't worry. None of us understand this idiot. Hold on. Let me ask him again. And then it's like a Dominican had to translate for Dominican to a Dominican. That's how messed up it was. I was like,
there's all kinds of accents from different kinds of like Spanish dialects, I feel like, but yeah, so this week we GB was doing some like Google Trend research, and I think that's why I brought it up to you guys. I talked about this last probably like a couple months ago. Adele, she published a like not transformation photo, but she published a picture that kind of made headlines because she dropped a ton of weight. And somebody published an article and apparently asked her what she was doing. And they said that she was following this so-called SIRTfood diet. And it turns out, and the reason why I'm bringing it up again, because I thought it was okay, that's over. Like, it's been like a couple months. I'm sure like people got over that. Apparently it's one of like the most trendy searches on nutrition related diets and stuff like that, along with calorie deficit, or how to get into a calorie deficit. So I figure I will bring the bros into having a conversation about it. So the way that we kind of like do these conversations for people listening in is we try to we identify a topic and then we research it. We understand a little bit more about it. We are not going to be the experts of it because we don't really have all the answers as far as like all this, but we're obviously going to try to like break it down and unfold it as best as possible. So you what is like the process for us to identify a diet, like really like what the roots of it are and how did it actually come about. And then at the same time, being able, to kind of explain whether like it's an effective thing, what's the research behind it. So we went into do a little more research on Sirt and Sirtuins, which is actually a family of proteins in the body. That's actually where the SIRTfood diet started. But before we kind of get into like the nitty-gritty details of it, like what have you guys been hearing about this? Or it was like when I brought it up, you're like, oh really? This is still a thing?
I'm surprised that it's still a thing, to be honest. I think after the photo had surfaced, I threw something up on TikTok about it. And at the time, like getting an engagement of like 1,500 is huge for me. Andres, I know you're like 1 mil, so just calm down, papi.
Cálmate, papi, tigre.
Cálmate, papi.
Suave.
But it was something that a lot of people had questions about. And to be honest, after that 1 or 2 weeks of just talking with others through DMs, and, I had maybe a client ask about it, but I thought it was done. And when you had said, hey, GB found this, like, wow, I thought it was dead, to be honest.
Yeah.
Same. And I actually reached out to Adele to see if she would join, but she was rolling in the deep. So unfortunately, we weren't able to bring her on. Starting to dad jokes early, ladies and gentlemen. But anyways,
Before we move forward, I think it's actually, I don't think we've ever shared this on our podcast platform, but speaking of like dad jokes, congratulations, Antonio.
Thank you. In
October. Going to be a dad. Yeah. Just for people listening in, like, I think Antonio didn't really say anything about he being a dad until like his wife Alyssa actually kind of until his wife Alyssa almost kind of hit, I think, like 7 months pregnant. So
yeah, dude.
And we kind of had like, and I went to their house and I had this kind of like awkward moment. So I was like, figure it out whether like, okay, like, is there like did she gain a little bit of weight or is there like a baby inside? But then is that weird, like type of like, you know, thing that you don't want to say anything because you're afraid, like if it's like she's not pregnant, it's like, are you calling me fat right now?
Yeah.
Dude, that is all right. So when I was a kid, I witnessed my mom have to have that conversation over the phone. And it was like, hey, like, I'm sorry I hadn't seen you in a really long time. I thought that you were pregnant. I am so sorry, but she actually wasn't. So from that point on, at the tender age of 8, I was like, I am never going to ask that question ever in my life. So, I mean, Tony, I had been asking like, hey, man, when are you gonna drop the news? And you're just like, oh, like, you know, whenever. It's like, okay,
it'll come out.
Baby's gonna come out at some point.
Whenever you're like strolling on, like, you know, strolling on Instagram with a stroller type of thing, you know. So, but anyways, congratulations.
Thank you. Man. So back to the SIRTfood diet. When you brought it up, I was like, really? We're going to the UK to talk about Adele? Like, props to her for losing the weight, because number one, that's never easy. We all know that with all the clients we've worked with, regardless where you're located, what your struggles are. It's difficult. But then a lot of people were like, is this like body positivity, body negativity? Like, that's a whole nother topic that we should all discuss as males and male dietitians. But going to the SIRTfood, I was like, oh, there's no way that, when you brought up, I was like, is this guy for real? So we did more than just a Google search, ladies and gentlemen. Andres sent us some awesome papers for us to make sure we gave you value, because the problem is a lot of people talk about diets without looking it up. They just do a Google search and that's what they give you. We actually dove into the research to give you guys the best information out there.
Yeah, and so we can kind of start. So let's actually break this down into like maybe like three parts. Part one is going to be defining the diet and really what are the phases. Then we'll talk about the science behind it, because there's actually some really interesting stuff about sirtuins, which are a family of proteins in your body that are really that are related to longevity and all kinds of different things in regards to metabolism. So there's cool stuff about it, but it's not what it's really meant to be. And then obviously we'll finish it up with the kind of like the closing remarks and sort of like a conclusion as to why is it effective, why does it actually work for some people, and then like what's the reality behind it. But essentially, I think it wasn't even like a research-based, like, you know, diet. Is essentially two celebrity nutritionists or so-called nutritionists, I think in the UK. They wrote a book about this, and they advertised it just like anything else, as like this like new revolutionary diet that actually works by turning on, they call it the skinny gene. And the skinny gene was basically it is great marketing. You know, like, quick parenthesis, like when I remember when I started school in Venezuela, they told me like there's two ways you're going to make it as a dietitian. Either you make a fancy diet and then you give it a nice little what's it called? Like a name or like a tag or something like this, or you have a pretty successful private practice. Like, this is literally what they told us. Like, if you want to make $1 million up pro, you're gonna have to create a diet. And this is exactly what these guys did. So they actually did a little bit of research on this, like, so-called sirtuins. And essentially they said, well, this is a diet in which you need to make sure that you're including foods that are able to activate, quote unquote, this specific like skinny genes or like these proteins. And they essentially created this list of what they call it like the top 20 SIRTfoods, or foods that are going to be able to do that. And when you start to like go down the list, like I'm just going to name just a few. Kale, red wine, strawberries, onions, soy, parsley, extra virgin olive oil, dark chocolate, matcha green tea, buckwheat, turmeric, walnuts, arugula, bird eye chili, I'm not sure what that is, lovash, I'm not sure what that is, dates, red chicory, blueberries, capers, and coffee. They don't say this is the only thing you need to consume, but they said this is like your diet needs to be composed of a lot of these different options from this list. So essentially, they broke it down into two different, I believe it's like two different phases. So they essentially broke it. First of all, you had to consume like their green juice, which has literally had like 5 or different things like, you know, that are part of that list. And in that first phase, you were supposed to, for 7 days, just only eat like the green juice. The first 3 days of the phase 1, caloric intake was restricted to about 1,000 calories. Of course, and we'll talk about obviously the calorie part. 3 green juices plus 1 meal. And each day you can choose from recipes that they actually publish in this book. Now, on days 4 to 7 of phase 1, the calorie was increased to 1,500. That would include 2 green juices per day, and then 2 more SIRTfood rich meals. So essentially, that was like phase 1. That lasted for about a week. The phase 2, it was like for another 2 weeks, and then they call this like the maintenance phase. Apparently you should continue to do or steadily lose weight. There wasn't really a calorie limit that they kind of established, but they encourage you to eat foods or like 3 meals that were full of SIRTfoods, and then just the 1 green juice per day. So essentially, they said 3 meals. Try to get them from like the cookbook here, and then just do like that green juice that essentially are saying. So most likely they were still consuming closer to like 1,500 calories or so. And then they said after the diet, they encourage you to repeat the 2 phases as often as possible and they call it, they encourage you to continue certifying your diet, like SIRT, get it? Your diet after completing this phases.
Dad jokes on deck.
Well, it's actually that's actually what they called it. But yeah, so that was like literally like the entire process. So again, like there's a phase 1, severe caloric restriction, and then phase 2, they call it like their maintenance, which was still, you know, calorie restricted programming, because it was based on everything that you're supposed to be following, specific meals. And so, that they had on this book. So,
and the green juice, just to clarify, they even said they have like certain ingredients that you put into it.
Yeah.
That are the SIRTfoods. And they say you need a juicer, not a blender.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, okay. So that's a huge one. So they don't even want you to have the fiber from it. I know we're going to talk about this in a second, but I know you do green juices, right, Andres?
Yeah, but I just eat the full thing. Just like nice.
So we'll talk about that. Yeah. Oh, nice and thick, huh?
Yeah, like with everything. I just don't strain it. Let's just put it that way. Anyways, but this green juice had kale, arugula, parsley sticks, celery sticks, ginger, apple, lemon, and matcha green tea, which is great. I mean, I love that green juice, but but I think, you know, just kind of starting off on like the scientific part of it. So this guy's actually looked at some really compelling research. I'm not going to lie. Cause like we look into obviously certain things. And I think yesterday I posted a TikTok about something known as confirmation bias, which confirmation bias is essentially when you find information online or in books or whatever that simply confirm or support a specific notion or hypothesis that you have. You know, case in example here is going to be people that follow a vegan diet. They're always going to find something that supports that. Same thing with people that follow a carnivore diet. Like they're always going to find something that kind of supports that. So that is essentially what's called confirmation bias. And I was actually talking about a Netflix documentary. So the point in case is going to be this. Like, so there's 2 guys that are like, we found the next big thing. They found an interesting article that talked about sirtuins, which are a group of 7 proteins found in the body that are heavily affected, specifically 1 family of them that are heavily affected by caloric changes and specific foods as like kind of like an on and off switch for a lot of like different metabolic processes. So that's obviously where they took from there, and they're like, oh, wow, like if we can create a diet that is specific to this specific proteins, then we're going to hit it. Like it's going to be a massive success. So they did an actual quote unquote study, and they referenced to it because these guys were like, well, in order for you to have a book and a diet, you probably need to kind of have some like science behind it. So they started off on the right path. The problem is like they never published the results of that study, and it was just basically they did it in the gym that they were working at. So they literally just did the diet, and then a bunch of people lost the weight, and then they just kind of published quote unquote their results within their book and saying like there's a group of people, and they kind of published it. I never read the book, but I think they published in a way that sounded like a research article, but it really wasn't. you know, and for people listening in order for you to publish a research article, it needs to go through a review process. It needs to go through it's a year long, and sometimes even more. Like it takes a while. So
real quick, I was talking to a cardiologist a couple of days ago. Did you know that the Ornish Diet, their N is like 21 or 23 people?
Their what?
So they got their N, like their population, the amount of people that they did to confirm the Ornish Diet.
Only
had like
one
20,
study?
Yeah, and it was 21 to 23 people, which I forget the number. And I was like, what? Are you for real? He's like, yeah, go look at the papers. And I was like, that's insane. That's
Ornish is the one that is like super high carb, very low protein, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what. Well, it's actually I was like watching the documentary from like Zac Efron, like the episode about the Sardinian diet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, but it just contradicts so many different things. And then like there's so much new research on it, and like but not to like deviate on that. Actually, we should probably do a podcast episode on that.
Well, sorry about that. I just wanted to say, like, sometimes these studies, they have such a small population. If they are published and they go through a rigorous chain, as you said. However, these people didn't even go through that. They just like, hey, we found some people that probably have never stepped foot in a gym. We're not going to put them on a caloric restriction. Oh my God, they got results. Surprise.
Yeah. We're going to implement a lot more fruits and vegetables. And here we go.
One thing, so I told Alyssa we were talking about this, and she looked at the diet because Adele, she said you can still have chocolate and wine. And Alyssa's like, you never said red wine anywhere on what you said through phase 1 or phase 2. So Adele's lying, or they just don't include in that, because I was like, Alyssa, you can't have any wine, you're pregnant. But anyways.
Well, and it's interesting. Yeah, that's true. Like you can have some grape juice. But so apparently there's like, you know, we're going to call this the Sirtuins as like, we're going to call them nutritional sensors. So essentially they have the ability to sense specific kind of situations, and caloric restriction is one of them. Caloric restriction is a state in which you put your body, and whenever your body feels and senses that there's not enough energy coming in from outside, is going to kind of activate specific things, including, we're just going to call them switches. So those switches obviously have like this like cascade of reactions that can we call it upregulate or downregulate certain like actions and reactions in the body to promote health. Like they call them also like autophagy, and like, which is obviously the cleaning of certain cells that are kind of like defective, increasing fat oxidation, all these different things to try to preserve the body's integrity. So the caloric restriction is able to turn on these genes. Now, there are obviously some research that they've done in something called in vitro. In vitro studies or animal studies. So in vitro studies is essentially in a Petri dish, which is literally like a very nutrition rich, like, you know, little like plate in which they kind of tried to mimic a condition within the cell, essentially. So they add all the right components of what you got going on in the cell. So they try to look into see what happens when you, for example, add something like resveratrol. Resveratrol is what's present in red wine. And I think there's another food that's high in resveratrol that I forgot about.
Isn't it grapes?
Well, yeah. So grapes and then red wine. So
where does wine come from, Dezi?
but resveratrol is something that has been actually being linked to longevity for a long time. And that's why, like, you know, a lot of people talk about you can have like a glass of wine every single night, and that actually can lead to really good positive benefits. But the research on the whole longevity and turning on the sirtuins with resveratrol and all these different things, I was just kind of reading before the conversation, it has been completely turned off. Like, it has just simply said, no, there's not really research to support that just increasing the amount of resveratrol is going to directly impact this set of proteins that can have all these effects. Now, the sirtuins, they do have that effect, increased fat oxidation, you know, like they have alterations. I'm reading here some options: alterations of metabolic functions, increased DNA repair, or really good positive things. But there's no, like, up to this day, there's no human research to support that there's foods that directly impact these things, except just good old caloric restriction, which is what this diet is actually doing indirectly. I think that's just kind of like the way that, you know, you kind of summarize that. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said and completely on board with it. And I think there's a lot more to the human body than what's in this diet. And one specific thing like that, going down to the genetic level, takes a lot more work than just following a celebrity diet plan for 3 weeks and then rinse, repeat Like, this isn't a shampoo, right? You just can't rinse and repeat and hope for better hair and hope for a better body by doing this diet. There's a lot of other factors going on. So I do agree with what the study says, and I'm sure it does great things in a petri dish, but how do you take a petri dish and then multiply it to 7 billion people on this planet?
Yeah.
And we look at things like there's a gene in our body of how we metabolize caffeine, right? And we know about this, and some people metabolize it quicker than others. I've noticed a lot in the Hispanic population, like a lot of Hispanics like to drink coffee at night before bed, especially like the Cuban population, and they don't get affected by it. It doesn't interrupt their sleep. However, you give it to someone else that they might not metabolize caffeine as quickly, it would cause a whole bunch of issues on their sleep. So looking at just one gene to be the one that turns on the skinny gene, I think that's like a very big long shot.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the foods that they're actually kind of talking about in here, they have been shown to improve certain things. Like dark chocolate is the only one that is kind of higher in like the I think resveratrol. But then at the same time, things like, for example, turmeric is in that list. We know turmeric has very potent anti-inflammatory effects. So there's obviously benefits on that. It's like what you're saying. It's like a lot of times like people try to find specific science to support something, but you try to like extrapolate it. Well, if it works in a petri dish, I'm sure like it may actually work with humans. Now, most humans are not smart enough to know what a petri dish is and really what research is. Like and it's fine. Yeah. It's not everybody's like is trained to understand scientific research, but they, because of that same reason, they're looking at this and they're like, okay, well, there's science to support that. Well, there is science to support something, but not that, or not necessarily that science is going to support the ability to do that in a human body. So point in case here is like, and I think I talked about this in our Facebook group, in my Facebook group recently, was like, there's a very recent like, full meta-analysis that looked at like 14 different diets, including Ornish actually. But they looked at like low carb, high carb, high protein, like macro base, like all these different programs. And they look at all of them. And then when you looked at the entire amount of trials that they looked, I think it was like closer to 120 trials and closer to 22,000 people. Again, like when they compiled all those different studies. And they try to understand what happens at 6 months and at 12 months. And from the perspective of weight loss, and at the same time also on cardiometabolic markers, like things like, heart conditions and stuff like that. And what they found was that people, on all of them, actually people lost weight. There was a trivial like advantage in like low carb diets, but still, which is so small that it wasn't even significant. But at 12 months, most of these people like actually stopped losing weight. They didn't say that they started gaining weight, but they simply stopped losing weight. And a lot of like the improvements in their heart markers actually were reversed. So they got better, and then they got simply back to like square one. So this, when you start to look at, for example, something like SIRTfood diets, like they're probably going to be part of that same thing. Now, the benefits of the SIRTfood diet is the fact that you're adding more foods that are going to be healthful. Like they're going to help you in many different ways. And I think that it's going to help you in the process. But that's like what I think it's kind of happening here. Like you're kind of adding a ton of like health. It's kind of like the same concept with paleo, like,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm looking at the top 20 list, I mean, the first thing that I thought of was like, oh, this looks a bit like the Mediterranean. I mean, we're looking at high levels of antioxidants and really great food. So it makes total sense that these people are going to have improvements if they start to improve their lifestyle. We didn't have any, I don't know if you read this, but I didn't have any background on what the people's biomarkers were or how active they were or what kind of health status
Nothing, because they didn't really share anything. Because again,
exactly.
They didn't really publish anything.
So if you run someone through a heavily calorically restricted diet and then you introduce better nutrition and then you also get them active, 100% you're going to make any type of improvement. So you're right. I feel like there is a lot of bias when this stuff gets presented, and it really takes a lot of traction. And that's, congratulations to Adele, 100%. And at the same time, does this work for everyone? I would say I don't know.
I would say that people just need to eliminate the rules established by a specific diet and just like simply take, okay, this diet, what it's telling me is that if I'm adding more things like maybe green juices, like in my mind, I see it as like I look at this like green juice and I'm like, that sounds like something that I would drink. Now, I'm not going to stop actually eating other things that I really enjoy and have, but then I'm going to bring this a part of my diet, because guess what? I'm going to add, like, you know, a serving of apples in here, some ginger, some celery, parsley, arugula, kale. Great. Like, I love that. I'm going to add that, but I'm not going to essentially say I'm going to eat this juice for like 3 days, because we all know that, you know, I can do this. If I take this green juice and I eliminate the kale and arugula and I add spinach, which is not like a SIRTfood diet maybe, and like I change that green apple with the banana, and it's still 400 calories or 300 calories or 200 calories, and I drink this like 3 times a day, like I'm going to achieve the exact same result. Like, and I can prove it. We can do like an N=3 study here between the 3 of us. And then I promise you that if we, all 3 of us, like you do the Sirtuin green juice, and I'll do the Andres green juice, and then Tony does the Tony green juice. We all kind of come up, but they're all the same amount of calories. And we do this for like 4 days. Like, I guarantee we're all going to achieve some sort of like weight loss in the process. So, well, but I'm doing the Sirtuin diet. Well, point proven, is not the specific green juice that kind of has this. It's not like something activating any kind of like what's it called,
skinny jeans.
The skinny jeans. It's like the freaking caloric restriction that you're creating as a result. But for some reason, people don't like to think of that. And that's why the second most biggest trend, because now there's so much people talking about it, like stop with the diets. It's the caloric restriction that they're creating what is helping you achieve that. And then now people are searching, oh, how do I get into a calorie deficit? Well, now that you're trying to learn how to do it, first of all, like, you were probably doing it a million times, following all this diet, you just never were aware of it.
Yeah.
And the amount of calories, 1,000 calories.
That's the other thing that I was thinking about too. Like, if I did that for 4 days, my wife would hate me.
Dude, that's 4,000 calories, right? Like, I probably eat that within like a day and a half. Like, not 4 days. Like, after like a couple days, I'd be not fun.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's obviously the things with this programs is, and again, it's like the rules, right? Like, okay, I now need to add 1 meal, but it's part of this like list. Nothing wrong with you learning how to cook because I'm sure, like, you know, you see all these cookbooks and the food looks amazing. So, but then again, you're replacing your McDonald's, or you're replacing your, you know, like the Wawa food that you were getting, or like for like an actual home cooked meal. It's not it's not like the meal is high in Sirtuin, like Sirtfoods or whatnot. It's the fact that you're actually cooking something at home. Like, it's crazy when I look at my Facebook community, like literally somebody just like posted something. I was like, this made my entire day. And she literally said, you know what? Like, ever since I kind of started like listening to like what this guy was saying, like, she literally referred to me as like this guy, or like Andres or something. And it's like, ever since I got referred to, like, whatever he was saying, I actually started to understand that, well, I just simply started to cook more at home, and I actually started to be more aware of like the amount of calories that I kind of had. And because of that same reason, I have dropped like 10 pounds in the past, you know, like couple months. And I'm like, props to you, because it wasn't because she followed a specific diet or some like weird stuff. It literally, she says like, she said, I'm thinking, what did she say in here? Like, I'm literally started thinking, I canceled my gym membership. I just started working out at home. So I've already lost 10 pounds since July 13. Cooking all my meals, and I'm actually enjoying it. I used to eat out a lot. There you go. That is the key. I used to eat out a lot, which we all know that here in the United States, like, you know, point in case like this, like this documentary with that Zac Efron, like we were looking at that, like the Sardinia diet, which is like super high carb, low protein. And GB and I, we were talking about the fact that it's like, she's like, well, they're not talking about this, but look at the plates, look at the portions. They were eating a plate of pasta, or like a plate of like the minestrone or whatever. And like the dishes were so small, they were like nice portions, and everywhere that you would see that, you would never experience the amount of like food that you would put on a normal plate here in the US.
Yeah. Well, you and GB, when you guys went to Thailand, I remember you guys telling me that you guys had super small portions of the protein and other products, correct?
Yeah. Everything was like in small portions. And the same thing is like, I mean, I grew up in Venezuela. That's exactly what that was too. You know, like the cups were small, like the dishes were small. And when I come in here, I'm like, wow, like now it's a norm for me. Like and that's the problem. Like, you know, people from, you know, Americans, like they go to other countries. They're like, oh my God, like they eat so little here. Like,
portions
another dish.
How do they survive?
No, that's like a real true portion. dummy. Like it's not necessarily like the amount of food that you're typically consuming in the US. And the rules are simple. Like if it's in front of you, you'll eat it, you know? So there are so many calories packed into so many small spaces that when you follow a diet like this and you're now eating more at home, like it's not the magic of the diet. It's simply the fact that you're just creating like, again, like a caloric restricted program that is probably activating those sirtuins, but not necessarily for the reasons that you think they are.
Yeah.
And just to kind of go back to SIRTfood as well, like 1,000 calories for guys is way too low. And even for women, 1,000 calories is super low. And if you do the shampoo method where you rinse and repeat as they suggest, where you do this every 3 weeks, your metabolism is going to get messed up.
Yep.
And one of the big things that they were talking about is also going to affect your mood. And like Dezi said, his wife would be upset at him after 1,000 calories, but they were talking about sex life, right? Like how it's going to be lower. And we talked about that on a past episode where going on such low calorie restrictions, your body can't even produce hormones for you to really run at its best.
Yep. And that's, I think, something that kind of happens to many people, that the chronic dieters. And because of that chronic dieting, it's just kind of creating that environment that is affecting other areas of people's lives. And that ongoing thing, and in combination with like the stress, like the chronic stress that people like live in here, specifically here in the US, that's another part to it too. Like you look at people in Sardinia, how do they live to be 100? Like the guy's drinking, like he walks like every single day, and then he goes and drinks a beer. So alcohol is the key? No, it's being freaking happy and like being like, you know, chill and not being so stressed about everything that you got going on in life all the days. I don't think sure, the diet is probably a big component, but all those people that live in a small island, they're happy people, you know? And that's something that I usually, I was like telling this to one of our new members of our program yesterday. I said, dude, like if you don't like change, like I can tell you anything that you want about nutrition. He's a doctor, actually. He's an internal medicine doctor. And I said, I can tell you everything there is to know about nutrition. But if you're building a nutrition program in a really weak mindset, or in a really weak kind of like lifestyle, nothing's going to change. And he was just talking about the fact he suffers from a lot of GERD and acid reflux. And I said, you know, like, tell me a couple things, like, you know, how are your stress levels? And then he just kind of went on to explain all the emotional stresses he's kind of going through. The same thing actually with, and the fact that sometimes like he just eats and he just eats so fast and like just needs to kind of get it out of the way. So there's so many different environmental factors and context that needs to apply within nutrition that we don't always like pay attention to. And we think it's just simply like the calories and what we eat, and then don't eat this and eat that. We need to stop that, you know?
Yeah. You know, I posted about this the other day too. I was like, you know, the biggest lie out here is that we need to move more and eat less. There's much more that goes into this. And I think, Andres, what you're describing too, what got brought up for me is like connection to your most important relationships. I mean, I always quote this study, like the Harvard study, and then they looked at like people who are their happiest over a 90-year span. They ate well, they moved frequently, and they were heavily connected to their most important relationships. And that's something that I find myself within the first month of getting new clients. And I'm telling them like, listen, everyone needs to be having the same type of food at the dinner table. Like that's your time for connection. If you ever sitting back drinking a green juice while everyone's having dinner, like we done effed up. So we're going back to that really important task of making sure that we are connected to those most important relationships so that we do have happiness and fulfillment. And I think that gets lost, especially in the American culture.
Yeah. So I think the concluding remarks on this is like, you know, if you're running into this and this same mold that we're explaining here applies to every single diet, like the whole conversation that we've had minus like the sirtuins and all those different things, like it applies to like, it's kind of like an insert the blank, like this podcast episode is like insert like diet blank into this, and then it applies
100%.
to the same thing. There's always going to be a specific diet that tells you like you need to cut this out or you need to do this and then you need to do that. There's always going to be the specific rules that establish that they all come down to the bottom line, which is going to be specifically for weight loss and fat loss, is going to be the fact that you're creating a caloric restriction in the process. And because of that, your body is like going through a metabolic kind of, you know, transformation that is like trying to help you lose some of the extra weight that you're kind of carrying on, but it's not the only way to do it. And then you always need to ask yourself, is it sustainable? Like losing weight is like 10% of the race. Like being able to maintain it and sustain it is 90%. you know? So all these diets, they teach you the 10%, but they don't really teach you that 90%. And it's in your ability to be able to kind of accomplish that. Like, you know, I had a conversation with a 50-year-old, like, you know, woman, and said, you've done this for 10 years and you always been able to lose the weight, but why are you here today? Because you're never able to maintain it. So I'm not going to teach you how to lose weight. I'm going to teach you how to maintain it, how to sustain like that actual weight loss. And we're not going to do this by doing crazy diets. And you have to be okay with that. So it's, you know, the lack of reality some people kind of experiences, I think is definitely something that kind of is happening as far as that. So.
Yeah. And to wrap it up, yeah, dude, don't go into all these things. And the great thing is having a dietitian like us on your squad to help ask those kind of questions, because recently one of my clients went to their doctor that they just switched over because their cardiologist actually passed away from COVID. So they went to, I guess this cardiologist's cousin was also, or is a cardiologist. So she started seeing him, and the doctor's like, all right, well, at your age, you should stop with the walking and add an hour of biking to your routine. Without knowing her, this was their first or second consult. And I was so upset. And he literally said, you should stop eating. After me helping this woman get her period back. She hadn't had her period in over 2 years. And now the doctor is telling her to move more, eat less. So having a dietitian on your team help you understand that. And then doing another SIRTfood diet that is going to turn on the skinny gene. Unfortunately, that's fake news. And the only thing that you should be worried about is putting on skinny jeans, not worried about turning on a skinny gene. All right. Because like, that's not going to help. What, Dezi? You don't believe that?
I love skinny jeans, dude.
Skinny jeans. Oh, I get it.
Oh, wow. All right, guys. I'm going to step out on this
one.
one.
You just get it too? Like, you just like now? Yeah, it makes sense. I get it. Yeah. I love my skinny jeans, but just not the jeans that turn off like weight loss. Oh man. Anyways, well, thank you guys. I appreciate like your input. So I think the long story short here is like, you know, make sure that you're, you know, save yourself the money that you would spend on like buying the book and all these different things, and just simply focus on making long-term changes that are going to last. And that includes like nutrition, sleep, stress management, like, you know, movement, like all this stuff all together to kind of help you achieve sustainability in this entire process. So as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us directly. We're going to link up obviously our personal Instagrams and contact community, you know, the way that you can contact us, and whatever information and studies that we kind of discussed during this conversation as well, you're going to find in the show notes. And of course, if you enjoy the podcast, we would love to have your review. So make sure you kind of leave it a 5 stars. If it's not more than that, if it's less than that, don't even bother. I'm just kidding. No, I'll be honest. Well, the other day I had one and it was like a 1-star review. And you know what it said? It was like, I wish it was in Spanish. I'm like, you're going to give me 1 star because it's okay. I get it. It says Spanglish. We haven't been doing like Spanish episodes. So I apologize. I need to change that, but don't be a dummy.
Hey, that's feedback. Maybe we need to do something in Spanish.
Yeah. Like, well, it's just so much work, man.
We'll summarize this all in 1 sentence in Spanish. No lo hagas.
No lo hagas. There you go.
Keep Adele on your Spotify playlist, not on your diet playlist.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Dude, please don't roll in the deep with this diet, please, guys. Oh man, that's awesome.
Hey, for real though, R.I.P. Nate. We're thinking about you, bro.
We're thinking about you, man. So hopefully you're still listening to this. And yeah, guys, so thank you so much again for another for listening to this episode. And of course, if you love us, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next week. Take care and have a wonderful day or night.